She started painting at 71. Not because she had always wanted to, because her doctor told her she needed something that was just hers. She sold her first painting at 74, and she told me the only thing she regretted was waiting so long to begin.
Okay, that already got me. Welcome to Honestly English. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Ryan. This is the show where we have real conversations about real life, and you pick up natural English along the way without even realizing it.
Today, we're talking about something that honestly makes me a little emotional. Why it is never too late to start over. Like, at any age, any point, any life.
And we're going to dig into why our brains convince us that starting over is only for young people, because that belief, that story we tell ourselves, is one of the most limiting things a person can carry around.
We've also got some real examples of people who built entirely new lives after 60, which, by the way, one of them is going to genuinely surprise you. And we're going to talk about what courage actually feels like when fear is bigger and the clock feels louder.
Right, and I'll say this now. I've been sitting with something personally about this topic, something I've never actually said out loud on this show. I'll get to it, but I want to wait until it fits.
Now I'm nervous for you. Okay, let's get into it.
So here's where I want to start. A few years ago, I read about a concept called the closing of possibility, and it basically describes a psychological moment that most people experience somewhere in their 30s or 40s, where they unconsciously begin to believe that certain doors are now shut. Not because anyone told them, just because time passed, and the brain quietly filed certain dreams under no longer realistic.
That is so real. And what's scary is that you don't even notice it happening. It's not like you sit down one day and say, okay, I'm done beginning things. It's just you stop applying, you stop trying, you stop imagining.
Exactly. And psychologists call this a form of identity foreclosure, which is when a person stops exploring who they could become and just locks down on who they currently are. They've decided the Reinvention chapter is closed.
Wait, identity foreclosure. That phrase is heavy because it sounds permanent, like a door that's not just closed, but sealed.
Right. But here's what the research actually shows. That seal is entirely self-constructed. It's not biological. There is no age at which the human brain loses the capacity for what's called neuroplasticity, meaning the brain's ability to grow new connections, learn new skills, form new identity. It slows, yes, but it never stops.
And I think this is where the cultural story gets so dangerous, because we've been told in really subtle ways that courage is a young person's game, that taking a risk at 22 is bold, but taking a risk at 55 is reckless or sad or somehow embarrassing.
And that story has real consequences, because when you internalize that, when you believe starting over is no longer your right, fear doesn't feel like fear anymore. It feels like wisdom, like you're being realistic, like you're protecting yourself.
Yeah, I felt that. I had this moment. I was 29, which sounds young, and it was, but I had a moment where I talked myself out of completely changing directions in my career because I kept thinking, you've already put so much into this path. Who starts over now? Like I used the word now as if 29 was already too late. I cringed thinking about it.
That's called sunk cost thinking, and it's one of the core psychological traps that makes starting over feel so worthwhile to resist. Your brain is essentially arguing that the past gives the future its meaning, which is, when you say it out loud, obviously backwards.
Because the past doesn't own the future. It just feels like it does.
Exactly. And this is where I want to bring in some real examples, because I think data and psychology only go so far. Stories go further. Vera Wong didn't design her first wedding dress until she was 40. She had been a figure skater, then a fashion editor. The world knows her for something she hadn't started yet at an age a lot of people consider midlife.
Or Faujia Singh, who started competitive marathon running at 89. 89, Ryan. He ran his first marathon at 89 and completed it. The potential he had was just sitting there, waiting.
And this is the word I keep coming back to, potential. We tend to talk about potential as a thing that belongs to the beginning of a life, like you've got all this potential at 22 and then slowly the tank drains. But that's not how it works. Potential is alive as long as you are alive. It is not a countdown.
That's one of the most useful things I've heard on this show, and we're the ones making it.
We learn in real time, honestly, we do.
But okay, let me push on something, because I think the argument that always comes up is, yes, but there are real limits. Like a 70-year-old can't become a professional gymnast. There are physical realities.
Sure, and I think the honest answer is yes. Some specific paths have physical ceilings, that's true. But most of the things people actually want to begin, a new career, a creative practice, a relationship, a business, a place to live, a way of seeing the world, those have no age ceiling. What they have is a fear ceiling, and fear is movable.
Say that again?
Fear is movable. It is not a wall. It's a door that feels like a wall until you actually push it.
Okay, so what makes beginning so hard at this particular stage? Meaning, once someone has already built a life, already has an identity, already has people watching them and expecting them to stay the same.
A few things. The first is what researchers call the identity threat response, which basically means that when we consider making a major change, the brain briefly experiences it as a kind of death of the current self, and the brain fights to survive. It generates anxiety, it generates doubt, it floods you with reasons why the new beginning is a bad idea.
And so the fear isn't really about the new thing, it's about losing the old self.
Right. The risk isn't the painting or the business or the move. The risk is who you become and who you stop being. That's where the real courage lives, not in the first step, but in the willingness to let a version of yourself go.
I had a conversation with my aunt maybe 2 years ago. She's in her late 60s, and she said something I've never forgotten. She said, "I'm not afraid of failing the new thing. I'm afraid of what the people who knew the old me will think." And I thought, that is so honest, so specific. That's not vague fear, that's legacy pressure.
Legacy pressure. That's a great name for it. And I think it's one of the most underrated barriers for people who've already built something, a reputation, a family, a role in a community. Because starting over can feel like saying everything I did before didn't count.
But it's not. It's the opposite, actually. Everything before is what makes the new beginning possible. It's the foundation, not the ceiling.
And here's the one thought I want to leave this section with. The woman from the opening, the one who started painting at 71, she said something that I think about all the time. She said, "I didn't start over, I started further." Because every year of life isn't lost time, it's depth. And depth is what makes a beginning alive.
That's it. That's the whole thing right there.
Okay, so let's get practical, because I know some people listening are sitting with this. They feel the pull towards something new, and they want to know, okay, but how do I actually move? What does the first step look like when fear is loud and the stakes feel real?
Yes, let's go.
Tip 1. Name the fear specifically, not generally. This is important because vague fear is almost impossible to act on. Most people say things like, "I'm scared it won't work out," which is massive and formless. But when you force yourself to be specific, "I'm afraid my family will think I've wasted the last 20 years," suddenly you've got something you can actually examine. You can ask, is that true? What would I actually say to them?
And I've done this. I literally wrote it out one night, like sat down with a piece of paper and wrote, what exactly am I afraid of? And once I wrote it down, some of them were so small. I was like, this is what's been stopping me? I was scared of what my college friends would think on social media. That was it. That was in the top 3.
The specificity makes fear human-sized instead of monster-sized.
Tip 2, and this one hit me hard. Stop waiting for the right moment. I know that sounds obvious, but here's what I mean by it. There is a version of waiting that feels like preparation, but is actually procrastination dressed up in responsible clothing. You're telling yourself you'll begin when the kids are grown, when the loan is paid off, when the timing makes sense. And the thing is, it always makes some sense. There's always a reason to wait that sounds reasonable.
That is such a good distinction, because the beginning doesn't require perfect conditions. It just requires one real move, one thing that is irreversible enough to make the next step feel necessary. Like you sign up for the class, you send the email, you buy the materials, something small that closes the escape route.
I signed up for something. I'm not going to say what yet, but I signed up for it a few weeks ago specifically because I knew if I paid for it, I couldn't back out. I tricked myself into beginning.
That's honestly a legitimate strategy. Burn the boats, make retreat harder than forward.
Tip 3, and Ryan, I want you to take this one because I think you say it better than I do.
Sure. Reframe what success looks like at the beginning, because this is where a lot of people give up early. They expect the new beginning to produce results at the same speed as their established life, and it won't. It can't. You're a beginner again, and being a beginner is not failure. Being a beginner is the only honest way to become something new. The woman who started painting at 71, her first paintings were not great. She kept them. She called them proof that she started.
Proof that she started. Not proof that she succeeded, just proof that she showed up.
Right. And honestly, if this is the kind of conversation you've been needing, subscribe to the channel. We're here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and we don't hold back.
Tip 4, find one person who started something new after 40, after 50, after 60, and learn their story. Not to copy it, not even to feel inspired necessarily, but to disrupt the unconscious story that says this is rare. Because it's not rare. It happens constantly. You just don't hear about it because culture tends to celebrate early beginnings and ignore later ones.
And the more you see it, the more your brain begins to file it as normal, as possible, as a path that actually exists in the real world. That's how you rewire the belief, not through willpower, but through exposure.
Tip 5, be willing to look ridiculous for a while. I know that sounds terrible, but genuinely, one of the biggest blockers for starting over at any age is the shame of not being immediately good. And that shame is sharper when you're older because you've spent years being competent. You've built a whole identity around knowing what you're doing. And then suddenly you're a beginner again and you don't know what you're doing and it feels humiliating.
But the willingness to be bad at something new is actually one of the most courageous things a person can do, because it means your desire to grow is bigger than your need to look polished. And over time, that tolerance for being a beginner is exactly what keeps the beginning alive.
My aunt called it her ugly first year. She said every new beginning she'd ever made had one. And once she accepted that the ugly first year was part of the process, she stopped trying to skip it. She just lived through it.
The ugly first year. I love that. I'm using that forever. So, our question for you today is, if age were not a factor at all, not even a thought, what is one thing you would start tomorrow?
Okay. Honestly, I would start writing, like properly. Not captions, not scripts. Fiction. I have had characters in my head for years, actual people with names and histories and things they want. And every time I sit down, I tell myself I'm not a writer. That ship has sailed. Somebody else is doing that better already. And I've let that story win for a really long time. But if age was gone as an excuse, it's the first thing I'd begin, tomorrow morning. No more waiting.
I think for me, it's music. I played guitar seriously until I was about 20, and then life moved fast and I put it down. And somewhere in the back of my head, there's this version of me that writes songs, not for anyone, just for the fact that something in me needs to make that kind of thing. And I've told myself so many times that I've missed the window, that I don't have the hours to get back to where I was. But
Getting back isn't the point, is it? Beginning is. And I think I've been waiting to deserve the beginning instead of just taking it.
Tell us your answer in the comments. We read everyone.
If today helped you, share it with someone who needs it. New episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. See you in the next episode. You haven't missed anything. You've just been getting ready for a beginning that only you can make, and it's still waiting for you.